They kept pushing. For years, they poked and tested Earth like it was some abandoned frontier world with no bite. First it was the patrol drones, harmless, they said. Then came the diplomatic probes, cloaked in smiles but stealing every bite of data they could. And Earth, bleeding from its own wounds, too busy with civil unrest, water shortages, and internal wars, stayed silent. Not out of fear, out of restraint. But restraint has a limit. The day they bombed Johannesburg, that limit shattered. 2 million dead in under 6 minutes. No warning, no declaration, just vaporized. The Corvalin Empire called it a misfire during orbital stabilization. Like that made it better. Like calling genocide a glitch made it forgivable. I was in Caracas when the broadcast hit. Sirens didn't even go off. Our own satellites were jammed. It was Corvalin media that told us what they'd done. As if we were a joke. I stood in front of a busted holoscreen in the middle of a ruined shopping district, watching alien generals smirk while our people screamed. That day, something changed. Not in the government, not in the fleets, in us, humanity. We'd begged for peace, we'd offered tech, trade, even territory, but they kept poking the bear, forgetting the bear had claws. The United Earth Coalition, a weak, bureaucratic mess of flags, was dissolved overnight. What rose from the ashes was simple. The human front. No speeches, no handshakes, just one message broadcast across every frequency, every spectrum, even their own. Your mistake wasn't the bombs. It was thinking we'd never return the favor. 6 days, that's all it took. From Earth's surface to the Corvalin capital orbit, we tore through them like we were born for it. Me? I led Omega Squad, ground assault, breach, and burn. We were the nightmare whispered through their comms. The squad, they said, wasn't real. But we were real, and we were angry. First strike hit their supply chain on Volnari Prime. That world didn't see sunlight for a week after we were done with it. No civilians, no children, just warships and fuel depots. We left the surface cratered and glowing. The fleet moved faster than anyone expected, thanks to Project Shard, the one tech humanity never shared. FTL drives with unpredictable jumps. Suicidal tech, honestly. Half our ships vanished in the leap. But the half that made it? They arrived inside the Corvalin defense grid like ghosts with nukes. By day 2, the war wasn't about tactics. It was about rage, about payback. The kind of payback that sings in your blood and makes even a disciplined soldier like me want to watch them beg. We didn't give them time to beg. The Corvalins, for all their posturing, weren't ready for humans to stop talking. They'd studied us as diplomats, scientists, broken tribes squabbling over borders. They had no data for what we became when mourning turned into fury. When restraint broke. I remember the first time I saw one of their cities burn from orbit. It was beautiful in a way that haunts you. Giant golden towers, floating transport loops, shimmering fields, all swallowed in orange fire. My second-in-command, Hale, said it best. They thought we were ants. Turns out we were wolves. And wolves don't ask for permission. By day 3, they begged for negotiation. Broadcasts in 100 languages. They offered credits, planets, reparations. But Johannesburg haunted us. So did the thousands of years they spent treating humanity like a species to manage, not one to respect. And me? I wasn't built for peace anymore. When we breached their high command on Hakar 3, we didn't take prisoners. There was no need. We weren't there to win hearts. We were there to remind them that beneath the culture and diplomacy, humans still knew how to wage war. Real war. The kind with no honor, no survivors, just scorched earth and a message carved in blood. You should have left us alone. They didn't. Now they were learning. By the 4th hour of day 3, every Corvalin fleet within reach of our orbital scans was either running or dead. I stood in the drop bay of the Bastion 1, surrounded by the hum of maglocks and the hiss of pressure seals closing tight on our exosuits. You could hear a pin drop in that steel coffin. That's how quiet we got before a drop. It wasn't fear. It was reverence, like a ritual. You don't joke or speak when you're minutes away from rewriting someone else's history with bullets and boots. Beside me, Hale was checking his wrist HUD for the third time. "They're still massing on the west spire," he said low. 12,000 strong. They've got tanks now." "Good," I muttered. "Means we won't have to chase 'em this time." Across from us, Diaz, our heavy gunner, cracked his neck and smiled like a man going to church. I used to think he was crazy. Now I just called him a true believer, the kind who didn't need medals or speeches or even orders. He just needed enemies. And the Corvalans had given us plenty. This target was Hakar 3's orbital control spire, the last defense node controlling fleet traffic in and out of Corvalan Prime. If we took it, they'd be blind. Deaf, isolated, that was the plan. Cut the head, and the Empire bleeds out. The light went red, then green. The clamps released. And gravity? That traitorous bitch let go. We dropped. No sound, no scream. Just a gut-wrenching pull as the bay floor opened, and Earth's vengeance fell from the stars like a pack of demons on fire. Omega Squad, 9 of us, in single-man drop pods, coded to land within 10 meters of each other in enemy territory. Death from above wasn't just a phrase anymore. It was our calling card. I remember the exact second I hit dirt. The shockwave blew out my ears. The heat from the explosion baked the inside of my visor, and my HUD lit up like a Christmas tree. Target markers, movement scans, hostile pings. All around me, chaos. But in my chest, only calm. Cold, brutal calm. I kicked open the pod hatch, plasma rifle drawn, and stepped into war. They were waiting. Finally. No more coward strikes from above. No more abandoned cities or fleeing patrols. These ones wanted to fight. They thought it would be their redemption. It was their funeral. Hale landed to my left, already firing. Diaz lit up the right flank with his rotary cannon, and the sound of his laughter, deep, unhinged, joyous, cut through the battlefield like music. We were outnumbered, 10-1 at least. But numbers don't mean much when you're surrounded by men who stopped fearing death a long time ago. I moved fast, taking cover behind a collapsed shuttle hull. Scanned left, Corvalan officer unit, target priority. I lined up the shot. One squeeze, headshot, gone. Their formation broke within seconds. Predictable. These weren't soldiers, they were rulers playing soldier, wearing polished armor, carrying weapons they didn't understand, hiding behind shields that folded on impact. We pushed forward. No retreat. No fallback plan. Omega never retreated. We either finished the mission or died so violently that others finished it for us. That was the rule. Inside the spire, it was worse. Close quarters, screaming civilians, panels exploding. Even as I moved through the halls, cutting down guards, I saw the fear in their eyes. Not of me, but of what we represented. The lie was unraveling. The empire they built on fear was cracking at the core. And then we reached the control chamber. Glass walls, floating command terminals, panoramic view of the war above. Corvalan fleet ships igniting in silent plumes of fire. Our ships slicing through like knives through wet paper. Their commander, tall, silver-skinned, armored in ceremonial gold, stood there with a blade too ornate to be useful. He raised it, postured, gave some speech in their language. I didn't let him finish. One round to the throat ended the charade. Hale spat on the floor. "I'm done listening to them talk." We planted the charges, downloaded their fleet access codes, and torched the rest. The spire collapsed 30 minutes later, and with it, their orbital communications. That was the moment we turned the war, not because of strategy or because we won a key target, but because we broke their confidence. They'd always seen us as a fractured species, a mix of weak governments, unreliable tech, and internal division. But they forgot the one thing that makes humans unbeatable when pushed too far. Unity in fury. Day 4 began with silence. No broadcasts, no retaliation. They were stunned. And for a brief second, the command back at Bastion 1 thought we'd won. But they were wrong. What we didn't know, what none of us could have predicted, was that the Corvalin Empire had a final protocol. One they'd buried in myth, locked away in biocode only their ruling class could activate: Project Purity. At 300 hours Earth time, 6 of our cities went dark, instantaneously. No explosion, no debris, just blackouts. Populations erased, not dead, not displaced, just gone. Entire cities: Chicago, Lagos, Seoul, Brisbane, Riyadh, Bogota, gone. I remember standing in the war room, helmet off, staring at the red blips vanishing from our global net map. "Population null," one of the techs whispered. "No biosignatures, no comms, no anything." We thought Johannesburg was the limit. We were wrong. Command called for a halt. They wanted to negotiate. The diplomats came crawling back out of their holes, talking about proportionality, damage control, reputation in the Galactic Council. I punched the table so hard I fractured my own wrist, because I knew what was coming next. Not diplomacy, extermination. We'd shown the galaxy that humans could hit back. Now we had to show them we could finish what we started. "Put me on the next carrier to Corvalin Prime," I told Command. "We end this. Today." They hesitated, talked protocol. Politics, I didn't wait. I took Omega and went dark. Disavowed, technically. Illegal. But war doesn't wait for red tape to clear. We hit Corvalin Prime on day 5. And it wasn't war anymore. It was annihilation. Their homeworld wasn't what I expected. Not some grim fortress or industrial planet. It was paradise, floating cities, crystal oceans, mountains with peaks like glass shards, a civilization built over millennia. Beautiful, sophisticated, and we leveled it. I didn't feel proud, not once, but I felt honest. Because war isn't noble. It's not strategy games or hologram briefings. It's blood and screaming and the sick knowledge that you're becoming what you hate just to make the pain stop. We targeted infrastructure first: energy cores, life support hubs, comm relays. Then we moved to civilian transport centers, not to kill innocents, but to choke their evacuation routes. We wanted them to feel cornered. We wanted them to see what we saw in Johannesburg, in Chicago, and we wanted them to remember the name of the species that taught them fear: human. By midnight, Corvalin Prime was burning, and not symbolically, literally. Fires reached their upper atmosphere. Their moons glowed orange with the reflection of the blaze. And yet, the Empire still clung to its pride. Their last chancellor sent a final message, not begging, not apologizing, accusing. "You have become what you feared. You are now the destroyers of worlds, just like us." He was wrong. We didn't become them. We surpassed them. Because they broke the rules first. They used genocide as diplomacy, and we just responded in the only language they finally understood. Fire. Steel. Silence. Day 6 was cleanup, extraction. No more resistance, no more fleets, just ruins and echoes. When we returned to Earth orbit, we weren't welcomed with cheers. There were no banners, no parades, just silence. And maybe that was fitting. Because the war wasn't just won, it was survived. And survival, in the end, is humanity's true superpower. The shuttle ride back to Earth was quiet. We were packed into the hull of Drop Crawler 7, shoulder to shoulder, strapped in like cargo, but none of us cared. No one spoke. No one slept. We just sat in our armor, blood still drying on the plates, fingers twitching from muscle memory. Trigger ready, even though there was nothing left to shoot. Hale stared blankly at the floor across from me, one eye swollen shut, lip split wide open. His breathing was shallow, like every inhale was a struggle between life and regret. Diaz, for once, wasn't smiling. His rotary had been slagged in the last engagement. Overheat malfunction. Cooked half his chest with it. Medics gave him pain suppressants, but I could tell it wasn't the burns that were bothering him. It was the silence. "You think we won?" he finally muttered. I didn't answer, because I didn't know. What the hell did winning even mean now? We had leveled their empire, destroyed their fleets, toppled their homeworld, erased centuries of their history in 6 brutal days. But Earth wasn't celebrating. It was mourning. The Corvalans took 6 of our cities. 6. Gone. Not bombed, not invaded, erased. Families, friends, children, just gone. No remains, no closure. Just static on the comms and blank spots on the map. You don't come back from that. Not really. The shuttle docked with Orbital Platform 9 above Earth. The doors opened. And that's when it hit me. No honor guard, no banners, no welcome committee. Just a security team, 2 medbots, and 1 tired-looking general who couldn't even meet our eyes. His name was General Kravik. I remembered him from the early days, back when this war was still theoretical, and we were sitting in briefing rooms pretending we had options. Now, his uniform was stained with sweat, his voice cracked from overuse, and the look in his eyes was the same one I'd seen in burned-out soldiers after their 3rd deployment. "We'll debrief in 30, he said. "Get them to the barracks, full scan, no press." That was it. No medals, no speeches, just quarantine and paperwork. We were war heroes, with no war left to fight. They put us in separate quarters, claimed it was protocol. But I knew better. We weren't being honored. We were being contained. Because people were afraid of us now. We were the squad that destroyed a species. Omega wasn't just a military unit anymore. We were a symbol. A warning. Proof that humanity, when cornered, doesn't just bite back, it devours. 3 days passed. I sat in that sterile barracks room staring at the same blank wall, replaying every second of the war in my head. Not the kills, not the tactics, the faces, the civilians on Corvalan Prime as we stormed their evacuation tunnels, the children being dragged by terrified mothers, the broken look in the eyes of a medic I'd let live because she dropped her weapon and raised her hands. She didn't scream. She just whispered something in her language. Something soft, final. I didn't understand the words, but I felt the meaning. You've become worse than us. And maybe... She was right. Kravik called me in on the 4th day, said there was a situation. I laughed, as if we hadn't just crawled out of a 6-day apocalypse. Then I saw the report. Retaliation cells, not Corvalan survivors, not soldiers, galactic mercenaries, fanatics, volunteers, aliens from the fringes of space, those who hated humanity's rise, who saw our victory as arrogance, as a threat. They were organizing, arming, planning counterstrikes, and worse, they were recruiting humans. Kravik slammed the report on the desk. "We're not done," he growled. "You thought we won? We started something. We lit a fire. And now the whole damn galaxy's watching to see if we burn." I stayed silent. Because he was right. Victory was never going to be clean. We hadn't just won a war. We'd rewritten our species' place in the galactic order. No longer victims. No longer the overlooked race begging for peace. We were the apex now, and the apex is always feared. I asked him what he wanted. "Go to Terra Sub 1, underground bunker east of Old London. There's someone you need to meet, someone who saw this coming long before the bombs fell." Terra Sub 1 wasn't on any official map. It was a cold, buried facility dug under layers of old cities, hidden beneath rusting ruins and modern sprawl, the kind of place that made your skin crawl with how quiet it was, No civilians, no chatter, just cold steel, dim lights, and silence that felt haunted. They walked me down a corridor and into a surveillance room filled with monitors. At the center, an old man in a wheelchair sat facing a massive screen showing orbital footage of Corvalin Prime, still smoldering, still broken. He turned slowly when I walked in, eyes sharp, voice gravel thick, accent old Earth, maybe East European. "You led the breach at the spire," he said, not asked. I nodded. "You looked them in the eye before you pulled the trigger." I nodded again. He smiled, a bitter, knowing thing. "You understand then. What comes next?" He rolled toward me and handed me a data chip. "This was recorded 7 years ago, a warning from the fringe colonies. The Corvalins weren't the first to test us, just the boldest. And now that we've proved we're capable of extinction..." He looked up at me, eyes burning with something between fear and pride. "Others will come, not to conquer, not to negotiate, but to finish what they believe we've started." The footage on the chip was grainy, blurry, alien symbols, ships I didn't recognize. And a voice, not Corvalin, deeper, mechanical. "Humanity is awake. The caged beast has tasted blood. Before it grows fangs, it must be culled." I handed the chip back. "So what's the play?" I asked. He stared out the window again, at the burning planet on the screen. "We stop apologizing," he said. "We stop pretending we're the underdogs. And we build. Not for peace, for survival." When I returned to the barracks, Hale was gone. Discharged. Probably buried in some black site to keep him from talking. Diaz was in surgery. Complications from the burns. I was alone again. Just like before the war. And all I could think about was the fact that humanity had done the impossible. We'd unified. We'd fought back. We'd survived. But now, we were at a new crossroads. We were no longer fighting to be taken seriously. No longer clawing for respect. We were fighting for something bigger. To keep what we'd taken, because the galaxy wasn't going to sit back and accept the new balance of power. Not when a lesser race burned one of its oldest empires in under a week. We weren't just a threat anymore. We were a precedent, and precedents get erased. I opened the old dog tags hanging around my neck, tags I hadn't looked at since the day I signed up. They still had my real name, the name I hadn't used since Omega was formed. Funny how something as simple as a name could feel like a relic after 6 days of hell. I closed my eyes and listened to the silence of the station around me. No gunfire, no alarms, no screams, just the sound of a storm that hadn't started yet, the one I knew was coming. And this time, I wouldn't be dropping in with 9 others. Next time, it'd be a full mobilization. Next time, all of humanity would be ready. Because this wasn't just the end of a war. This was the beginning of a new age, one written in ashes, etched in ruins, and whispered across the stars in one word: human. The galaxy underestimated us once. They won't get a second chance. The first strike hit Lytton Station. It wasn't official, not military, no flags, no declarations, just a freighter registered out of neutral space, hauling minerals from the asteroid belt, that exploded when it docked. 6,000 dead. Not soldiers, not command staff, just miners, civilians. The footage was grainy, shaky. Cameras knocked sideways from the blast, but you could still see the chaos, limbs, screaming, vacuum breach. I watched it on loop in the war room, the same room where I'd once given the order to breach Corvalin Prime. Now I stood in that same stale, recycled air, hands clenched into fists, and listened to the new intelligence director try to spin it as an isolated act of terror. Bullshit. "Who did it?" I asked. She hesitated. The kind of hesitation that's less about not knowing and more about not wanting to say it out loud. We believe it was the Yasari. Of course, the Yasari had been circling like vultures since the war ended. Small, quiet species, tech-focused, biologically frail, always on the fringe of power. Never spoke during council meetings, but always listened. Took notes. Watched. They'd waited centuries for humanity to screw up. We were too fast, too aggressive, too passionate, unpredictable. The 6-day war made them nervous. Now they weren't nervous. They were bold. I stared at the hologram of the freighter, watching it rotate slowly above the war table. "You want to talk to them?" I asked. The director blinked. "Talk?" "Yeah. Call a meeting. Beg for answers. Offer compromise." Her face paled, like she'd just realized where this conversation was going. "We can't escalate again," she said. "Not this soon. Earth's recovering. Our cities are still rebuilding." I cut her off. "We don't negotiate with cowards who bomb civilians." And I meant it, because this wasn't politics anymore. This was inevitable. The moment we crushed Corvalin Prime, the galaxy shifted. The weak got scared. The envious got angry. And the bitter, they got dangerous. We weren't fighting an empire now. We were fighting shadows, factions, cells, rogue tech syndicates, pirate networks, alien rebels who saw themselves as galactic preservationists. Their goal wasn't power, it was balance. And in their eyes, humanity had tipped the scale too far. I left the station 2 hours later. No orders, no permission, just a coded data burst to an old Omega frequency. 2 hours after that, they started arriving. Hale came first, walking like he had more metal in his knees than bone. His face was stitched up from the last mission, but his eyes hadn't changed. "You still breathing?" he asked, gripping my shoulder like a brother. "Barely," I muttered. Then Diaz rolled in, fresh out of recovery, still limping, still grinning. "I heard we're getting the band back together," he said. "Thought you'd be dead by now, Commander." "I'm trying," I replied. He laughed. 4 more came after that, old squad mates, some from Omega. Some from other units that got disbanded when the peace treaties started rolling in. Each one looked the same. Worn down, not broken, angry, controlled, dangerous. Exactly the kind of men I needed. We didn't have official uniforms anymore. No medals, no unit patches. We didn't need them. Our scars were enough. We met in a private hangar deep beneath Old Berlin, one of the few human cities untouched by the war. The hangar was cold, industrial, and barely lit. Perfect for what we were planning. I laid out the intel on a rusted table. Yasari outpost on Galvan 9. Secret listening post. Black market weapons. A staging ground for more accidents. We weren't going to wait for a UN vote or a council ruling. We were going to hit them first. Hale looked over the files, slow and quiet. "You're not asking permission this time." "No point," I said. Diaz chuckled. "We're ghosts now." "Exactly," I nodded. "No politics, no chains. We strike fast, hit hard, and disappear." There was a pause. No debate, no hesitation. Then Hale leaned back and grinned. "Just like old times." We touched down on Galvan 9 during orbital dusk. That 30-minute window where the sun dipped low enough to blind sensors, but high enough to mask infrared signatures. Our shuttle was cold-rigged. No beacon, no ID, just heat shields and modified thrusters that made it sound like a falling star instead of a military drop. Perfect. Galvan 9 wasn't a war world. It was a trade post, old, quiet, built into the side of a canyon that looked like it had been carved out by gods. The buildings were modular, stacked like bricks on rusted scaffolds. No cities, just outposts, quiet lanes, smuggler trails, a ghost town with secrets. We landed 2 clicks south in an abandoned mining shaft, hiked the rest on foot, slow, silent, suits dampened, rifles cold, no chatter. And there it was, the outpost, glowing faint green in the distance, like something half alive and sick. We moved like shadows. Diaz took rear. Hale flanked. I led the breach. 2 guards at the front door. Yasari, spindly with translucent skin and eyes too big for their skulls. They didn't even see it coming. 1 suppressed shot each, straight through the eye. They dropped like broken marionettes. Inside it got worse. Not because of the resistance, they barely fought, but because of what we found. Humans. 4 of them, shackled, starved, wired with experimental tech. Test subjects, Hale muttered, checking the data logs. They've been experimenting with mind bridges. Mind bridges were outlawed. Even the Corvalans never used them. It was a violation of the body. Turned soldiers into puppets. Removed pain, fear, choice. One of the prisoners was a kid. Couldn't have been older than 16. His eyes were open, but there was nothing behind them. Diaz crouched next to him. Still alive? I checked his vitals. Barely. He exhaled slowly. Monsters. We torched the lab. No data backups, no evidence left. We took the survivors and left the rest in flames. It wasn't justice, it was a warning. Back on Earth, Command didn't acknowledge the mission. They couldn't. Too political. Too messy. But they didn't stop us either. In fact, we started getting anonymous drops. Intel packets, satellite codes, off-the-books supply crates. Someone up high was silently backing us. The message was clear. Keep going. Just don't get caught. So we did. Over the next 4 months, we hit 12 more sites. Pirate bases, rogue science hubs, secret black market exchanges run by alien guilds that swore they had no side. Each time we found more human tech. Stolen, copied, modified. Each time we found more victims, human and alien, wired, dissected, twisted, and each time we killed everyone involved. Because war isn't just fought on battlefields anymore. It's fought in labs, in data cores, in the shadows of peace, and we were done pretending otherwise. But the galaxy noticed. They started calling us the Wraiths of Earth. Said we were ghosts that came with fire. Said we struck without warning, vanished without trace. They said our eyes glowed in the dark. They weren't entirely wrong. By the time year 1 after the war came to a close, the galaxy wasn't just afraid of humanity anymore. They were hunting us. The Yasari put a bounty on my head. 10 million galactic credits. Some human mercs even tried to collect. Bad move. Hale shot the first one at 30 yards through a broken visor. Diaz hung the other from a comm tower with a note taped to his chest. We don't forgive traitors. We don't forget family. We weren't just a squad anymore. We were a myth. And that terrified them. Because myths don't follow rules. They don't answer calls. They just show up, right before the end. But what scared them the most wasn't what we did. It was what we were becoming. Not just soldiers, not just survivors, but a new breed of human, efficient, ruthless, unified by something deeper than orders, purpose. The galaxy had its chance to accept us as equals. They chose to treat us like a virus. So now, we'd become the cure. By any means necessary. I always knew we wouldn't be welcomed home as heroes. But I didn't think they'd try to erase us. 6 months after Galvan 9, Omega was labeled rogue. Not just unofficial, not just black ops, criminal. Every operation we'd carried out, every asset we'd neutralized, every lab we burned, classified as unauthorized aggression against sovereign galactic entities. Didn't matter that we had proof. Didn't matter that we were saving lives. All that mattered was optics. The galaxy was scared, and Earth's new leaders wanted to calm it down. They didn't want us disrupting the fragile alliances they were trying to stitch together like bandages over a gunshot wound. So, they threw us under the bus. Officially, Omega didn't exist. Our names were scrubbed from the records. our medals revoked. We were enemies of peace now, relics of a darker time, dangerous men in an age that wanted to believe the war was over. But wars don't end when politicians say they do. They end when the threat does. And the threat hadn't gone anywhere. I found out about the warrant when I landed on a private landing pad outside the Berlin Arcology. One second I was stepping out of a transport ship, and the next I had 2 rifles pointed at my chest and a pair of masked guards barking at me to stand down. They scanned my ID, didn't say a word, just stared like they were looking at a ghost. "Commander," one of them finally said, voice unsure. You're not supposed to be here." "No one's supposed to be anywhere," I said calmly. "That's the new rule, right?" They didn't laugh. I didn't expect them to. They let me walk. They shouldn't have. Orders were probably to detain or shoot on sight. But fear is a powerful thing, and my reputation still did a lot of the talking for me. Inside, the arcology was clean, bright. Artificial sun streaming down on perfectly trimmed trees, kids playing with AI drones, holograms peddling nonsense about a new era of peace. It was a lie, a pretty one, but still a lie. Behind the gardens and glass, Earth's leadership was cracking. I met with Councillor Rane in a locked maintenance shaft 3 levels below the public zone. He used to be a colonel during the Corvalin War, fought on the ground, took a blast to the spine and never walked again. Now he ran political interference for whatever was left of the old guard that still believed in what we fought for. "Do you know what they're calling you?" he asked as I lit a cigarette. "Plenty of things, I imagine. Extremist, war criminal, monster, even terrorist in some feeds." "Anything flattering?" He didn't smile. "They're scared, Commander," he said. "Not just of you, of what you represent. We're trying to show the galaxy we're civilized now, that we can be part of their world." "Why the hell would we want that?" That shut him up. He sighed and rubbed his temples. "There's factions forming, in the council, on the colonies, even in military command. Half want to double down, reinforce the human frontier, build fleets like we're preparing for another war. And the other half? They want to dismantle everything. Shut down Earth's armories, hand over command to the Galactic Peace Accords, strip us of our edge." I leaned forward. "You do that, we won't survive the next attack." He nodded. "I know. But fear makes people stupid." That line stuck with me, because fear didn't just make people stupid, it made them dangerous. 2 weeks later, someone tried to kill me. Not in some back alley ambush or flashy assassination. No, this was calculated, surgical. I was sleeping in a safe house north of the Canadian wastes, middle of nowhere, off-grid, old-world tech. Only 3 people knew I was there. I woke up to the hiss of gas. By the time I rolled out of bed, the room was already filling with white vapor. My eyes burned, my skin blistered. I smashed through the emergency window and rolled out into the snow, blind, gasping, heart pounding. By the time I got my senses back, the entire building was up in flames. No one came. No rescue drones, no search team, no media. It was like it never happened, like I was never supposed to have happened. I made contact with Diaz that night, found him running security on a mining convoy in the Outer Rim under an alias. He looked older, thinner, still had that fire in his eyes, though. "You look like hell," he said when he saw me. "Close enough." He poured me a drink and waited. "I think we've been replaced," I said finally. "Yeah," he replied. "I figured that out when I saw a bunch of 20-somethings in corporate armor parading around with Peacekeeper Division stitched on their backs." Peacekeepers. That's what they were calling the new task force. Not soldiers, not warriors, peacekeepers. Like the last war had been a misunderstanding. Like the next one wouldn't come loaded with teeth. "Where's Hale?" I asked. Diaz didn't answer right away. His jaw clenched. "Went back to his family," he said finally. Tried to live quiet. Off-world. And? Diaz looked away. They killed him last month. Labeled him resisting arrest. The silence after that was heavy. I didn't cry. Hale wouldn't have wanted that. But something deep inside me cracked. Like whatever piece of me still believed in the idea of home just let go. They weren't just trying to bury us. They were executing us. I spent the next month traveling across the colonies, quiet, watching, listening. And what I saw chilled me more than anything the Corvalans ever did. Compliance, humans, my people, folding into alien systems, rewriting our laws to match theirs, censoring our history. Young recruits being taught that we were the aggressors, that Earth overreacted, that war was a mistake. They were rewriting the truth, and people were buying it. I met a teacher on Callus 3 who called the 6-Day War an unfortunate retaliation. I met a politician on Vega Delta who said humanity's strength had to be managed through diplomacy, not demonstrated through violence. I almost shot him in the face, but I didn't, because I realized something. We were at war again, not with aliens, not with rogue factions, but with ourselves. Our own leadership was dismantling the one thing that had kept us alive, our edge, our unity in fury. Our willingness to do what others wouldn't, and if someone didn't stop it, we'd lose everything we fought for. That night, I sent out a single message. Coded, encrypted, old Omega protocol. It read, "The war never ended. The enemy just changed faces. If you're still breathing, it's time to come home." I didn't know who would answer. Didn't know if there was anyone left. But 2 days later, I got my reply. 4 words. Where do we strike? The war we fought in space? That was survival. But this was personal. We weren't soldiers anymore. We weren't fighting aliens. We were fighting something much worse. Ourselves. Our own people. The ones who cashed in on our sacrifice, then buried us when the smell of smoke made the meetings uncomfortable. They didn't win peace. They sold it. Piece by piece, system by system. And now they were selling us. I built the network from scratch. No funding, no gear drops, no backup from high command, because high command was the rot. What I had were whispers, veterans, angry ones, forgotten ones, men and women left behind, locked out of the new system. They called us many things. Terrorists, extremists, remnants. We didn't care. We called ourselves the Ember, because even when they tried to snuff us out, we still burned. We started small, sabotage missions, data leaks, uncovering documents the peacekeepers tried to bury, showing people what the new regime was hiding, the backdoor deals, the unspoken compromises, the way Earth's sovereignty was being auctioned to alien alliances in exchange for protection that we didn't need. You know what the worst part was? People believed it. Once the fear wore off, once the trauma settled and the media stopped blasting humanity the heroic across every screen, all that was left was bitterness, exhaustion. They didn't want to remember what we did, so they called us monsters. Because it was easier than admitting we saved them. But for every 10 citizens that spit on our name, there was one who remembered, one who saw through the lies. That was enough. The first real strike happened on Vesta Station. It wasn't armed. It was worse, a compliance center, clean, sterile, quiet. They called it a re-education dome for traumatized veterans unable to reintegrate into peaceful society. I called it what it was, a prison. Hale's brother was in there. So was Diaz's son. We hit it at 200, cut the power, used thermal suits to bypass their heat sensors. No bloodshed, not at first, just precision. But someone squealed. Security kicked in, automated drones, flash rounds, gas deployment. We adapted. We always did. By the time the guards switched from non-lethal to live ammo, we were already in the lower levels, pulling bodies out of cryopods and shock tanks. You know what they were doing to them. Testing obedience drugs. AI-generated neurosuppressants, quieting the parts of the brain responsible for defiance, anger, identity. Hale's brother was a shadow of himself, eyes open, hands trembling, could barely speak. They called him a success story. I called it psychological execution, so we burned the place to the ground. Broadcasted the whole thing through black market comms, every second, from the prison cells to the medical reports, sent it straight to the public streamlines. Earth authorities tried to deny it. Too late. The footage went viral. Even the most loyal mouthpieces couldn't hide it. That's when things started to fracture. Inside the council, silence wasn't working anymore. They started turning on each other. Blame games, resignations, factions forming fast. Some wanted to crush us outright. Military lockdowns, orbital scans, purges. The others, they wanted to negotiate, like we were political protesters. They still didn't get it. We weren't trying to change policy. We were trying to dismantle the rot. And that rot had a name. The Unity Protocol. It was the master plan. Quiet. Hidden behind public acts and treaty signatures. But we cracked the file thanks to a defector from the inside, an AI systems analyst who'd been forced to work under council surveillance. Unity wasn't about peace. It was about integration. Over the next 5 years, humanity would surrender full command of its planetary defenses to the Galactic Accord. Military decisions, out of our hands. Tech development, regulated by alien overseers. Even birth rate policies were on the table, all under the excuse of equalization. They wanted to make sure no human war machine ever rose again. That's when we realized this wasn't post-war diplomacy. This was a slow invasion. No fleets, no fire, just submission dressed up as progress. And we were done playing along. I met with Diaz in the ruins of old Tokyo, still radioactive, still broken. We set up shop in a collapsed bank vault, where the walls were thick enough to stop satellite scans, and the dead were too many for surveillance teams to patrol often. He was thinner now, scarred, less jokes, more focus. "We're running out of time," he said, dropping a datapad on the table. I scanned the contents. Shipments, movements, construction data, orbital uplinks, 6 massive platforms being assembled above Earth, disguised as comm relays. They weren't relays. They were control nodes. Once activated, they'd give the Accord real-time influence over Earth's planetary grid. Satellites, weapon arrays, even infrastructure AI. Total override. And they were weeks away from completion. "We strike all 6, I said, tossing the pad aside. Diaz raised an eyebrow. "That's suicide, even for us." "I'm not asking for permission." He grinned faintly. "Didn't think you were." We called the operation Ashfall. 6 squads, 6 targets, simultaneous strike. No survivors, no negotiation. Just clean, controlled demolition and the kind of shockwave that couldn't be spun into a press release. Our squad, the original Omega Ghosts, took Relay 1. The prototype, the most heavily guarded. I won't lie, I didn't expect to survive. But that wasn't the point. Ashfall wasn't about victory. It was about reminding them. We reached the relay during a debris storm. Perfect cover. Got inside through a waste chute. Hauled 30 pounds of thermal charges up 7 decks. They spotted us on deck 6. Gunfire. Drones. A damn peacekeeper unit in reinforced suits trying to talk us down through the comms. I turned it off. We weren't there to debate. We reached the core chamber with 5 minutes left on the clock. Diaz was bleeding from his side. Hale's replacement, a young sniper named Bren, was limping, armor cracked. But we got it done. Planted every charge. Synced it to the others. And then I stood in the center of that chamber and sent one final broadcast. This is what happens when you forget who we are. This is what happens when you try to leash humanity. We gave you peace. You answered with chains. We're done being polite. And then we blew it all, 6 relays, 6 fireballs across orbit, visible from every continent. The Accord lost control that night. Literally, figuratively, politically. The platforms crashed, systems failed, power grids glitched. Panic spread faster than propaganda. And amid the chaos, something else happened. People woke up. Veterans came out of hiding. Citizens demanded answers. Even council guards started resigning, saying they hadn't signed up to silence their own kind. And somewhere deep inside Earth's military archives, an old file was pulled up again. Omega Protocol. A kill order once issued. Now, being reconsidered, not as an execution, as reinstatement. But this fight isn't over, not yet. The Accord is regrouping. Their allies are furious. They're calling us radicals, threats to galactic harmony. Some are even pushing for a joint invasion of Earth to preserve stability. Let them come. We've been underestimated before. Didn't end well for the last ones. And me? I'm still here, scarred, tired, but alive? Because no matter how hard they try to bury us, ashes still burn. They gave us 7 days to comply. 7. Fitting, in a way. Like they were mocking the 6-day war. Mocking the time it took for us to turn the galaxy upside down. Now, they wanted it flipped back, nice and neat in 1 more day. The broadcast came through every major channel. No encryption. No translation needed. The message was clear. The Accord demands full compliance. Earth must surrender military command, shipyards, and orbital control. All resistance units must disband. All rogue combatants are to be turned over. Failure to comply will be considered a declaration of war. You have 7 days. They called it peace enforcement. I called it occupation. And this time, they weren't hiding behind words. They sent the fleet. We got the first blip on long-range sensors 12 hours after the broadcast. Dozens of ships dropping out of FTL across the edge of the Sol system. A wall of alloy and arrogance. Flagships, carriers, dreadnoughts. Not scouts. Executioners. They didn't come to negotiate. They came to end us. Councillor Rani summoned me to the deep vaults under Geneva. I half expected a kill team to be waiting when I arrived. Instead, I found him alone. No guards, no armor, just his old wheelchair and a bottle of Earth whiskey sitting between us. "You were right," he said without looking at me. I waited. He poured 2 glasses. No small talk. "They're not coming to scare us. They're coming to crush us, erase us from the history books, and our new leaders are lining up to sign the surrender order. You know what that paper says?" He tossed a datapad at me. I scanned it. It wasn't a treaty. It was a sentence. Human military command dissolved. Orbital access restricted. Resource rights surrendered. One Earth government, managed under Accord supervision. Human colonies were to be reclassified as probationary territories. "Probation," I muttered, "for surviving." He nodded. "They don't forgive us for winning." "They never will." He drained his drink. "They fear us, Commander. And frightened rulers only know one solution. Destruction." I looked at the glass in my hand, but didn't drink. "Why call me here?" He leaned in, voice low. "Because I have access to something dangerous, something built during the Corvallan War, top secret, buried beneath Luna Base, designed as a last resort." "What kind of weapon?" Ronnie looked me dead in the eye. "The kind that burns entire systems." They called it Project Red Veil. Not a bomb, not a fleet, a contagion. Nano-based, AI-augmented, self-replicating, and encoded to target non-human genetic structures. It spread through heat signatures, through breath, through water. And once activated, it couldn't be stopped. It had been tested once, long ago during the final years of the Corvallan War, on a small moon base housing captured enemy soldiers. The results were never released. The site was sealed. The scientists disappeared. Now it was our ace in the hole. A way to tell the Accord that Earth might die. But we'd take everything with us. I brought the file back to the Ember. Diaz stared at the data silently. Bren paced like a caged animal. "Holy hell," Diaz finally muttered. "You sure this isn't bluff tech?" "No bluff," I said. "I've seen the logs. It works." Bren slammed his fist against the wall. "Then why the hell didn't we use it back then?" "Because we weren't monsters," he glared. "And now?" I looked him dead in the eye. "We're out of options." The Accord fleet would be in low orbit by the 5th day. We didn't have the numbers to repel them. We didn't have enough ships. Our people were divided. Our leadership was fractured. The world was still bleeding from the First War. If they landed, they wouldn't stop at occupation. They'd cleanse. Culture, history, memory, everything that made us human, gone. That's when I said it. If they're going to erase us, we take the pen from their hand. Permanently. Silence followed. Deep, heavy. No one objected. That scared me more than anything else. We had 3 days to prepare. I divided our units. Some were sent to infiltrate Accord landing zones, others embedded in the major cities, prepping for worst-case insurgency. Bren and Diaz handled the insertion plan for Luna Base. My job was simpler. Get the message out. We hijacked a council beacon, broadcasted a single transmission across every device, every screen, every drone within the Sol system. To the people of Earth, they are coming, not to protect, not to unify, to end us. We fought once. We bled. We lost cities, families, futures. And we were told we had to smile and move on. Now they demand our obedience. But what they forgot is that Earth never kneels. If they strike us, we burn them down. You don't have to fight, but you damn well better remember who you are. And then the countdown began. The Accord ships entered orbit on day 5. Their first act? They blacked out our satellite grid. No warning, just silence. Global comms dropped. Civilian power stations failed. Some cities went dark, others panicked. But not all. In the heart of Old Cairo, protests erupted, people waving Earth flags, chanting, not against us, against them, against the Accord. On the Martian colonies, soldiers, real soldiers, refused to surrender their weapons. Entire battalions went rogue, disabling Accord forward camps and rerouting supply chains to resistance hubs. Even the peacekeeper divisions, those pretty suit enforcers with their AI advisors, started crumbling. Half their units dropped off the grid. Some joined the Ember, others just vanished. Fear works both ways. We weren't the only ones backed into a corner. They were too. By day 6, the final Accord ultimatum hit Earth. Surrender or suffer. Submit or be removed. Choose peace or face extinction. They still thought they had the high ground. Still believed we were too fractured, too tired, too afraid. They didn't know about Red Veil. They didn't know that we had one final play, not to win, but to deny them victory. Diaz and I stood at the edge of the lunar facility, overlooking the cold gray horizon. The sky above was filled with ships, Accord dreadnoughts, silent and massive, blotting out stars like vultures. "It's time," Diaz said, handing me the activation key. "One push, 1 second, that's all it would take." He looked at me, and for the first time since Johannesburg, I hesitated. Because beneath all the rage, all the scars, all the nights clawing through blood and betrayal, I saw it, the line, and I was one breath away from crossing it. If I pushed that button, there'd be no coming back. Not just for them, for us. I looked at Diaz. If we do this, we become the thing they feared. He nodded. Maybe, or maybe we prove them right. I stared at the key. The galaxy had never believed in humanity's restraint. They believed in our fire, our rage, our ability to destroy. But maybe, just maybe, that's what gave us the right to choose, to be more than what they expected, to be something they couldn't control either way. I lowered the key. Diaz's eyes didn't blink. "You sure?" "No," I said. "But if we burn it all down, we prove their point." I turned away. "Let's fight, one last time. No genocide, no extinction, just us, on the ground, in the dirt, where humans are at their best." He smiled. "Back to the beginning." So we did it the old way. No superweapons, no clean kills, just war, trenches, ambushes, hacks and sabotage, cities rising, resistant cells blooming from the shadows, old veterans teaching street kids how to fire, how to move, how to survive. And for the first time in years, Earth wasn't divided. It wasn't governments, it wasn't borders, it was us. Humanity, the way it was meant to be. They thought we'd kneel, they thought we'd fold. But Earth wasn't built on surrender, it was built on defiance. We weren't fighting for resources, borders, or galactic titles. We were fighting for something older, something they couldn't code into treaties or trade agreements. The right to exist on our own terms. And as day 7 rose, dark with smoke and red with fire, the world didn't feel like it was ending. It felt like it was waking up. The first direct assault came over the Pacific just before sunrise. 3 Accord dreadnoughts dropped into the upper atmosphere and unleashed their boarding pods like a swarm of mechanical locusts. Automated infantry units, precision-made to neutralize resistance. But they weren't ready for what they hit. See, they thought we'd play by their rules, face them in clean formations, with proper identification and surrender corridors. What they got instead was rage in camouflage. Warlords from the South American jungles who never put their weapons down. Former soldiers from the Asian inner-city blocks. Arctic tribes who turned scrap metal into railguns. Civilians who hadn't seen combat in 20 years, but never forgot how to kill. And us, the Ember, firelit and ghost-born. We didn't engage them head-on, we tore them apart from the inside. I led the charge on the Tokyo front line. Not the clean new arcologies the Accord helped rebuild. No, the ruins beneath, the sewers, the skeletons of old Earth. That was where the real fight happened, where mud and blood mattered more than orbital supremacy. We had no command chain, just units connected by grit and vengeance. Diaz was with me, heavy cannon slung over his shoulder, grinning like a man who'd finally come home. "They brought the whole sky," he said, nodding toward the swarm of ships above. "And we brought hell," I replied. Then we moved, room by room, street by street, firing into machines that didn't flinch, didn't bleed, but did die. Explosives rigged under sewer grates. Portable EMPs detonated from reprogrammed food drones. A child climbed a drainage pipe and dropped a homemade acid charge onto a peacekeeper's head. And the people? They rose, old and young, rich and poor. Something snapped in the species. Not out of hate, out of memory. The Accord wanted them to forget the cost of submission. We reminded them with fire. Meanwhile, on the Martian colonies, something unexpected happened. A full detachment of Accord fleet units, human volunteers, trained off-world, refused to fire. They jammed their weapons, shut down their drones, turned their ships toward the stars and sent only one message. We remember who we are. Their commanders called it mutiny. We called it coming home. Back on Earth, we were holding, barely. Cities turned to war zones. Skies ripped in half by cannon fire. Mountains cratered. Oceans boiling under the weight of falling starships. And yet, the Accord wasn't winning. Because they didn't understand something crucial. War isn't just about force. It's about will. And we had it in every broken building, in every scream of defiance, in every fist clenched around a battered weapon. Still, we knew something wasn't right. The Accord was bleeding. But they weren't panicking. That's when the data leak came through, intercepted by one of our AI remnants, a ghost protocol hidden in the orbital debris network. It wasn't just about Earth. This was a test, not of our strength, but of our compliance. See, the Accord had been planning something far beyond this war, a full-scale genetic regulation system designed to phase out aggression, defiance, and unpredictability in galactic species. They called it Project Equinox. Earth was the final variable. If we broke, if we submitted, it would confirm that no species, no matter how violent or independent, could resist proper conditioning. That's why they came in force, not just to stop us, to prove a point. If they succeeded, the rest of the galaxy would fall in line. If they failed, then everything they built, every illusion of order and peace, would collapse. We broadcasted that file across every known system, used their own comm relays to do it. Aliens across the outer rim saw it. Species who'd been told they were free. Species who'd already had parts of their DNA altered, who'd watched their cultures harmonized under the guise of peace. That was the real war. Not Earth versus the Accord. Freedom versus control. And suddenly, we weren't just fighting for ourselves anymore. We were the example, the first spark, the beginning of a fire they couldn't contain. By the time the Accord realized what we'd done, it was too late. They couldn't retract the message, couldn't scrub the truth. Riots broke out in a dozen sectors. Accord allies turned neutral. Peacekeeping forces abandoned their posts. And Earth? We didn't just hold the line. We broke theirs. I led the final push in Johannesburg, the very city they tried to erase years ago, now reborn in metal and scars. Their last ground division was dug in around the orbital uplink station, a sleek, alien structure they'd built to permanently connect Earth to Accord command. We surrounded it from all sides, ex-soldiers, farmers, engineers, even street gangs wearing body armor painted with Earth's flag. I stood before them, rifle in hand, and said nothing. Didn't need to. The moment the order came down, we moved as one. A storm of dirt and gunfire and vengeance. And when we breached the command tower, when we reached the core, we didn't destroy it. We rewired it, turned their tool of control into a beacon of rebellion. The Accord fleet retreated 2 days later. Not because we destroyed them, but because they were losing the narrative. And in the galaxy, that's more dangerous than losing a battle. They left orbit under fire, dragging their broken pride behind them like a dead flag. Earth had won. Not just the fight, the meaning. After the war, I didn't go home. Hell, I didn't even know what home meant anymore. Diaz lost his left arm in the final charge. Bren took a plasma round to the ribs. Survived, barely. The ember faded back into the dust. Its name whispered like a curse and a prayer. We weren't needed anymore, which was fine. We'd done our job. Earth was still standing, still flawed, still fractured, but free. No overlords, no forced treaties. No puppet governments, just humans learning to be human again. And for the first time, I understood what we'd really won. Not the right to destroy, but the right to choose. They say the galaxy changed that day, not because of a weapon, not because of a fleet, but because one species, just one, stood up and said no. No to control, no to silence, no to peace at the cost of their soul. We weren't perfect, never were, never will be, but we're ourselves. Unchained, unbroken, human, and that's something no Accord, no empire, no alliance can ever take away. Not again. Not ever.